The year was 1874, and the Arizona Territory was a land caught between the old world and the new, where dust storms ruled like kings and men drew their last breath beneath skies too wide for mercy. Into that harsh expanse rode a woman in flight. Her name was Clara Bellamy, and she carried nothing but a small satchel, a revolver she barely knew how to fire, and a heart tired of being caged. Clara had been born into Charleston society, the daughter of Judge Thomas Bellamy, a man who measured worth by lineage and law. She had been schooled to curtsy, to pour tea without a tremor, to speak only when spoken to. Her mother had died when Clara was 16, and from that day, the Bellamy mansion had become her prison, its marble floors and polished silver a reminder of how little freedom a woman could truly own. When she turned 22, the judge announced her engagement to Captain William Harper, a decorated war hero nearly twice her age. He had money, land, and ambitions that stretched westward like a map of conquest. Clara had met him once at a dinner party. He looked her over as one might appraise a fine horse, measuring, calculating, approving. His words had been polite, his smile controlled, but his eyes had chilled her. That night, alone in her candlelit room, Clara had studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was pale, frightened, trapped. She pressed her palm against the glass as if to touch another life, another self. That was when she made her choice. By dawn, she was gone. She traded her pearls for a seat on a westbound stagecoach, bound for the edge of the known world. She didn't care where it went, only that it went far. The journey across the plains was long and cruel. Dust storms rose without warning, sweeping across the land like God's own punishment. The air tasted of grit and sweat, and the nights grew cold enough to freeze breath midair. Yet Clara endured. She learned to tie her skirts above her knees when the mud grew deep, to ride side saddle on a weary mare, and to fire a revolver at coyotes that prowled too close to the camp. The men on the wagon train learned to respect her quiet strength. They called her Miss Bellamy and joked that she had the backbone of a Texan. She said little in return. Each mile westward was a step toward the woman she wanted to become, one who lived by her own hand. But freedom, in that land, was as dangerous as it was precious. Near the San Pedro River, fate came for her in the shape of an ambush. The sky was pale with dawn when gunfire split the morning. A band of outlaws, desperate, hungry, wild-eyed, fell upon the caravan. Horses screamed, wagons overturned, and the air filled with smoke and panic. Clara's horse bolted. She clung to the reins until her arms burned. Then the world turned upside down. She hit the ground hard, the breath torn from her lungs. When she awoke, the sun had climbed high. Her canteen was gone. Her head throbbed, and a gash on her arm bled sluggishly through her sleeve. Around her, the desert stretched endless and silent. The others, wagon, horses, travelers, were gone. Only the wind answered her cry. She stumbled forward, dizzy with thirst. The sand burned through her boots. Time lost meaning. She walked until her legs gave out. The last thing she remembered before collapsing was the shadow of a horse moving across the sun. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, like dawn creeping over distant hills. Someone was kneeling beside her, dabbing water against her cracked lips. She blinked, and the blurred shape resolved into a man, a warrior. His skin was bronzed by the sun, his hair long and black, tied with a strip of red cloth. His eyes were dark as the desert night, calm and searching. He was Apache. Clara's heart seized. All her life she'd heard the stories, the whispered fears of frontier women, the painted images of savagery. But the man before her didn't look savage. He looked human, powerful, yes, but not cruel. His gaze held no gloating triumph, only quiet concern. He spoke something in a language she didn't know, then switched to broken English. "You hurt." She tried to speak, but her throat rasped. "Water," she managed. He gave her his canteen. She drank greedily until he gently took it back. Then with swift, sure movements, he tore a strip from his shirt and bound her wound. His touch was careful, almost reverent. When he rose to fetch wood, she watched him move, graceful, deliberate, his muscles shifting beneath sun-worn skin. She didn't know his name, but already she sensed that this man belonged to the land in a way no settler ever could. He built a fire as twilight deepened, the sky a canvas of rose and gold. The scent of smoke and mesquite filled the air. Clara lay near the flames, her mind drifting between exhaustion and wonder. He cooked something over the fire, meat from a small hare, and offered her a piece. She hesitated, then accepted. Hunger won over fear. For a long time they ate in silence, two souls from opposite worlds bound by the necessity of survival. Occasionally he looked at her as though trying to read her thoughts, and she wondered what he saw, a lost woman or something more. When she finally spoke, her voice was little more than a whisper. "Why help me?" He paused. "You are alone." She nodded faintly. "Yes, alone." He stared into the fire. "Desert kill those who walk alone." Something about the simplicity of his words struck her. She'd run from civilization thinking loneliness was freedom. But here, in the vastness of the desert, loneliness could mean death. Hours passed. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows. Her eyes grew heavy, but her thoughts stayed fixed on the man beside her. She wanted to ask his name, his story, why he looked at her as if he'd seen her before in some old dream. Instead, what came out was softer. "Stranger," a confession whispered between sleep and waking. "You're my first," she murmured. He turned, brow furrowing. "First?" "The first man," she said, her voice breaking. "Whoever looked at me like I wasn't something to be owned." For a long moment, he said nothing. The wind moved through the canyon, rustling the sage. Then quietly he replied, "You are not owned. You live." And with that he settled beside the fire, back straight, eyes turned toward the stars. Clara drifted into sleep, the warmth of his words settling over her like a blanket. In the depths of her dreaming mind she felt something awaken, a sense that the life she'd left behind was gone forever, and that whatever future waited for her would begin with the man who had found her in the desert. When she opened her eyes at dawn, he was still there, watching the horizon. His silhouette was cut against the light like a statue of an old god, timeless, steadfast. She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, their fates were sealed. Morning came like liquid gold spilling across the cliffs. Clara woke to the scent of juniper smoke and the sound of a river whispering somewhere below. Her arm throbbed, but the bleeding had stopped. When she sat up, she saw her rescuer crouched by the fire, sharpening a stone-tipped knife with slow, even strokes. His movements were precise, each one deliberate, each pause filled with purpose. He turned when she stirred. The same calm, dark eyes met hers. "You live," he said simply. "I suppose I do," she answered, her throat still raw. "Thanks to you." He nodded, the faintest curve touching his lips before he rose and offered her a wooden bowl filled with water. She drank greedily, the coolness running down her dry throat like mercy itself. For the first time, she saw the place clearly. They were in a narrow valley ringed by red stone. Cottonwoods trembled along a thin creek, and smoke from other fires curled into the brightening sky. A handful of figures moved among the trees, women grinding maize, children chasing one another through the dust, men repairing tools, so he was not alone. When a small boy spotted her, he froze, eyes wide. Then he ran toward one of the women, tugging at her skirt and whispering fast. Faces turned her way, curious, cautious, unreadable. Clara's pulse quickened. She was a stranger among them, a foreigner in every way that mattered. Her rescuer noticed her fear. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "No harm," he said. My people," she swallowed. "And you?" "I am Taza." The name hung in the air between them like a promise. That day, Taza's sister Sona brought her a woven blanket and a small portion of cornmeal bread. Sona's eyes were kind, her smile hesitant but not unfriendly. Though the elders kept their distance, Clara sensed they followed every movement she made, measuring whether she was danger or omen. She tried to stand, but the wound in her arm protested. Taza caught her elbow to steady her. His hand was warm and firm. For an instant, she looked up into his face and saw something that unsettled her more than fear: gentleness. Days passed. She slept beneath a lean-to near the creek, her arm healing under Sona's care. Taza brought food. Berries, strips of dried venison, sometimes a single flower laid quietly beside her meal as though words were not enough. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried the low cadence of the land itself. At first, Clara planned to leave. She told herself she would wait only until she was strong enough to travel east, to find a town, perhaps send word to her father that she was alive. Yet each dawn, when she watched Taza ride out to hunt, something in her chest twisted. One evening, she followed him partway into the hills. The desert spread before them, miles of shimmering heat and stone carved by time. He pointed to the horizon. There, he said, mountains, home of my father. Soldiers came, burned, now only wind. She turned to him. Your family? Dead, he said, voice flat. Then after a long pause, I fight, but fighting take much. I want peace. The honesty in his words pierced her. He had lost everything, yet he still looked toward peace. She thought of Charleston, the parlor rooms filled with talk of progress and order while men like her father sent soldiers west to build that order on the bones of people like Taza's. Shame pricked her throat. That night they sat by the fire. He taught her a few Apache words, Dasi for sun, Tushka for moon. She tried to repeat them, laughing softly when he corrected her pronunciation. In turn, she taught him to say river and sky. Their voices mingled with the crackle of the fire, weaving a new language made of patience and curiosity. As the stars came out, Taza drew in the dust with a stick, a symbol like a circle split by a single line. What is it? She asked. Path, he said. 2 worlds. I walk between, she understood, and you don't belong to either. He looked at her then, long and steady. Do you? The question struck deeper than she expected. She turned away, unable to answer. Days folded into one another like waves of heat. Clara grew strong. She learned to grind corn, to braid her hair like Sona's, to walk silently over the rocks. The people no longer stared. They nodded in greeting. Still she remained the outsider, the white woman rescued from the desert. Taza began to take her with him on short rides. He showed her how to find water by watching where birds descended, how to test the wind's direction by letting sand fall from her palm. She rode behind him on his horse, her arms around his waist, the rhythm of his breathing steady beneath her cheek. Each mile carried her farther from the world she'd known, deeper into the one that was remaking her. One afternoon they stopped atop a ridge overlooking a valley filled with wildflowers. The air shimmered heavy with the scent of sage and rain. Taza dismounted and offered her his hand. This place, he said softly. I come when heart heavy. She smiled faintly. Then it must be heavy often. He looked at her then, not with amusement but something fiercer, something raw. Before, he said, I walk alone. Now I do not know which path is mine. The wind lifted her hair. Maybe it's the same for both of us, she whispered. He reached out, brushed his fingers against a strand of her hair, and for a moment time held its breath. His touch was careful, reverent, as though he feared she might vanish like a mirage. When their eyes met, words became useless. The silence said enough. That night she could not sleep. The memory of his touch burned through her like fire. She watched the stars wheel overhead, heard the coyotes cry in the distance, and realized that the fear she'd felt the first day had turned into something else, something she dared not name. A week later, the rains came. Thunder rolled across the mountains and the creek swelled into a rushing torrent. The camp huddled beneath makeshift shelters. Clara worked beside Sona, securing baskets, laughing when the wind stole her shawl. When lightning cracked the sky, she felt alive in a way she never had back east. That night, after the storm broke, Taza came to her fire. His hair was damp, his shirt clung to his shoulders. Without a word, he sat beside her. The world smelled of wet earth and rebirth. She looked at him, the firelight flickering across his face. Do you believe, she asked softly, that 2 people from different worlds can share one heart? He was silent a long time. Then he said, when the rain falls, desert and sky are one. She felt her throat tighten. He reached for her hand. The roughness of his palm met the trembling of her fingers. You're my first, she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The first man I've ever trusted. His hand tightened around hers. Then I will be your last, he said, voice low and certain. My heart is yours, woman of the East. The fire crackled between them, throwing sparks into the dark. Around them, the desert breathed, the endless rhythm of wind and water, of loss and renewal. In that vast, untamed land, 2 souls found each other not by fate but by choice, and though neither could name it yet, the desert had already claimed them both. The heat came early that summer, crawling over the desert like a fever. Even before the sun rose, the air shimmered, and the earth cracked beneath every step. Clara woke one morning to the sound of arguing voices, the elders, their tone urgent, fearful. Sona translated for her quietly. Word comes from soldiers. They search? Say a white woman lives with the Apache. They come soon. Clara's stomach turned cold. Soldiers? Yes, Sona said. Men with blue coats and guns. Clara knew then what she had feared all along. Someone had seen her. A traitor, perhaps, or one of the scouts who roamed the trails. Her presence here was a spark ready to start a wildfire. Taza came to her later that day, his face carved with worry. They come, he said. We must go. Go where? North, maybe. Into the mountains. But she could read in his eyes that it was too late. The soldiers would not rest until they found them. As night fell, they packed what little they could carry. Sona and the others moved silently, gathering food and water. The horses were restless, snorting at the scent of smoke far off on the wind. Taza listened, head tilted like a man hearing something others could not. Then he said, They are close. The attack came with the dawn. Gunfire split the morning stillness, echoing across the valley. The cavalry charged through the sagebrush, the U.S. flag snapping above their heads. Clara recognized the man at their lead before she could even think. Captain William Harper, her fiancé once by her father's decree, now a ghost from the life she had buried. He rode hard, jaw clenched, rifle gleaming in the sun. Find her, he roared. The woman is mine. Clara's blood turned to ice. Taza shouted for the people to flee. The women gathered the children, running toward the rocks while the warriors formed a line along the creek. Clara could hear the screams, the pounding hooves, the rattle of bullets slicing through air. Taza, she cried. They'll kill you. He loaded his rifle calmly. I fight for my people. For you. Before she could stop him, he was gone, riding straight into the storm. The world exploded. Dust and smoke swallowed everything. Clara fell to her knees, hands clamped over her ears. She saw flashes of color, blue uniforms, brown skin, red fire. The acrid scent of gunpowder filled her lungs. Then came a voice cutting through the chaos. Clara! She turned. Harper was there, reins tight, his horse pawing the ground. His face was hard as flint. Get over here, no. She screamed. You don't understand, he said, advancing. You're not safe with them. That savage, he's using you. Her fury broke loose. He saved me. He's the only man who ever treated me as something more than property. The captain's face twisted, half in disbelief, half in rage. You're out of your mind. He raised his pistol. He dies for what he's done. The shot rang out, pain seared through Clara's shoulder. She staggered backward, the world blurring. She heard Taza's voice cry her name, a sound like thunder cracking open the sky. He charged through the gunfire, his horse leaping over fallen men. When Harper turned to aim again, Taza's rifle spoke first. The captain fell from his saddle, eyes wide, disbelief frozen on his lips. The fighting raged around them, but Taza's only thought was Clara. He leapt from his horse and caught her before she hit the ground. Her blood stained his hands, hot and red as sunset. You bleed, he said, voice breaking. She smiled weakly. I bleed because I love you. He lifted her into his arms and ran, ducking through smoke and brush. Bullets whistled past, splintering the rocks, but he did not stop. He carried her into the canyon, into a world of red stone and shadow where no soldier dared follow. By the time they reached a small cave, her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. Taza tore his shirt again, pressing it to her wound. He muttered prayers in Apache, words older than the desert itself. Stay with me, he said. Do not sleep, her lips trembled. You saved me again. He cupped her face gently. Always. They stayed hidden through the day. Outside, the battle faded into distant echoes. The soldiers, beaten and scattered, retreated down the valley. Only the wind remained, carrying the smell of smoke and blood. When night came, Clara stirred. Taza sat beside her, his back to the cave wall, rifle across his knees. His eyes were fixed on the fire, but his thoughts were far away. You should go, she whispered. They'll come back. He shook his head. They will not find us. You can't stay here forever. I stay as long as you need. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I never asked you to risk your life for me. He looked at her then, the firelight dancing in his eyes. You did not need to ask. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they could not say. The war between their worlds, the lives already lost, the love that defied both. After a while, she said softly, When I was a child, I used to dream of running away, to some place no one could find me. I thought if I could reach that place, I'd finally be free. He leaned closer. And now? She smiled faintly. Now I think freedom isn't a place. It's a person. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then you are my freedom too. Outside, lightning flickered on the horizon, painting the desert in flashes of white. Taza laid down beside her, his arm around her shoulders. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heart. Steady, strong, unyielding. I thought I knew what love was, she whispered. I was wrong. He lowered his head, his breath warm against her ear. Love is not words. It is choosing to stay when the fire comes. The storm broke then, rain drumming against the canyon walls, thunder echoing like the heartbeat of the earth. Inside the cave, they held each other, bound by a promise that neither language nor war could erase. When dawn returned, the desert was clean and quiet again. Smoke rose faintly from the valley below. The soldiers were gone. The Apache dead were already being mourned in silence. Clara stepped out into the pale morning light, her shoulder bandaged, her body weak, but her spirit fierce. She looked at the sky, endless, merciless, beautiful, and whispered a prayer for the man who had fallen because of her, and for the man who still stood beside her. Taza joined her, his face calm but weary. You cannot stay here, he said. More soldiers will come, she turned to him. Then we'll go together. He shook his head. No, they will hunt me. You must go east where they will not look. Her throat tightened. You saved me twice. Don't ask me to live without you. He touched her cheek, his hand trembling just slightly. We are not lost, he said softly. We are the wind, and the wind always returns. Then he kissed her. It was not a kiss of farewell, it was a vow born from blood and rain, made in the heart of a land that had seen too much death to believe in promises. Yet still they made one. The desert healed slowly, so did she. Weeks passed since the battle that had scattered the cavalry and burned the camp to ash. The Apache had retreated deep into the mountains, moving like ghosts through canyons no white man dared to follow. In a hidden valley where wildflowers bloomed between stones, Clara lived among them, half guest, half exile, her heart divided as the land itself. Taza came and went like the wind. He was a leader now, called upon to speak for his people, to plan for what must come. When he returned at night, dust on his shoulders and weariness in his eyes, she waited by the fire. They said little, because words could not mend what the world had broken, but in the silence between them there was peace. One evening, as the moon climbed over the cliffs, she asked him quietly, What will happen to your people? He stared into the flames. We cannot fight forever. The white men come with iron roads and guns that do not miss. They take water, land, even sky. Soon they take spirit too. Her heart ached at the weariness in his voice. There must be a way to live together. Taza looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. Can a wolf live with the man who hunts him? She had no answer. In the days that followed, scouts brought word that new settlers were arriving from the east, building forts and ranches along the river. Soldiers rode escort, and with them came priests, lawmen, and surveyors, men who would draw lines on paper and call them destiny. Clara felt the weight of two worlds pressing down upon her. She had fled the civilized one, yet it followed her like a ghost, and though she loved Taza with all that was left of her heart, she could not escape what she was. One night, while the camp slept, she wandered out into the open desert. The wind whispered through the mesquite, carrying the scent of rain. She thought of her father's house in Texas, the polished floors, the lace curtains, the cage of manners and obedience. She thought of the way Harper had once looked at her, not as a woman but a prize to be displayed. And she thought of Taza, his scars, his hands rough from war, his eyes that held both fire and sorrow. She sank to her knees, pressing her palms to the cool earth. Where do I belong? She whispered. Behind her, a soft sound. Hoofbeats. Taza dismounted quietly and came to her side. You walk far tonight. I couldn't sleep. He crouched beside her. Your heart fights itself, she nodded. I love you, Taza, but I can't help feeling I'm stealing something that isn't mine. He tilted his head. What do you steal? Peace, safety, maybe your people's trust. I don't belong in your world, and I can't go back to mine. He reached out, his fingers brushing her chin, lifting her gaze to his. You belong where you choose to stand. She tried to smile, but her eyes were wet. And where do you stand? With you, the word struck deep. They stayed like that for a long time, the stars spinning slowly above, the desert breathing around them. But love does not stop the march of history. The following morning, a young scout rode in from the south. His face was gray with dust and fear. "Soldiers," he said breathlessly. "A regiment." They marched toward the valley. Panic rippled through the camp. The elders argued, some calling for surrender, others for flight. But Taza stood firm. "We cannot run forever. If we yield today, they take tomorrow. If we fight, at least we stand as men." Clara watched him from the edge of the circle, her heart breaking. He was everything noble and fierce that she had ever known, and she knew this battle would destroy him. When the meeting broke, she caught his arm. "Don't do this, please." He looked at her gently. "You once said freedom is not a place but a person. If that is true, then I fight for the freedom you gave me." She shook her head, tears streaming. "You'll die. Then I will die free." That night the camp prepared for war. Women gathered what food they could, elders whispered prayers, and the warriors painted their faces with ash. Taza came to her tent before dawn, wearing his rifle and the necklace of eagle feathers his father had given him. He said nothing at first, only knelt beside her and pressed something into her palm, a carved pendant shaped like the moon. "It is my mother's," he said softly. "It guards the soul." She closed her fingers around it, unable to speak. "When I go," he continued, "you must ride north. Find the trading post near Santa Fe. Tell them your name is Clara Hayes. Do not wait for me. I can't leave you. You must." He leaned closer, his voice low. "If I fall, live. Promise me that." Her throat closed, but she nodded. "I promise." Then he kissed her, a kiss fierce enough to burn the fear away. When he rode out with the dawn, the warriors at his side, Clara stood among the women on the ridge, her heart in her throat. Dust rose behind the horses, turning gold in the sunrise. She pressed the pendant to her lips and whispered a prayer that crossed all languages. Hours later, thunder rolled in the distance, not from the sky, but from guns. The valley filled with smoke and screams. She could not see him, but she felt him, as if his heartbeat echoed in her chest. By dusk it was over. Only a few returned. Their faces were hollow, their voices broken. Sona came last, her eyes red. "He fought like lightning," she said softly. But they were too many. Clara fell to her knees. The world went quiet. For 2 days she did not speak. She helped the wounded, carried water, buried the dead. She moved like a ghost, the pendant heavy against her breast. Then, one night as the moon rose, she heard a sound outside her tent. A single horse, limping, its hooves dragging. She stepped out, heart pounding. There he was. Taza, blood stained his side, his arm hung useless, but he was alive. When she ran to him, he caught her in his good arm, holding her so tightly she could hardly breathe. "I told you," he whispered, voice rough with pain. "The wind returns," she sobbed against his chest. "You fool. You beautiful fool." He smiled faintly. "The bullet missed my heart. Maybe because you already took it." She helped him inside, bound his wounds, and through the long night she sat awake, watching his chest rise and fall. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and the faint promise of dawn. Between two worlds they lived, neither Apache nor white, neither free nor captive. Yet in that fragile space they found something greater than both. When the first light touched the mountains, she leaned close and whispered, "You're my first, my only." His hand found hers, strong even in weakness. "And you are my forever." Autumn crept over the desert like an old spirit, quiet, golden, and full of memories. The sun no longer scorched the skin, and the nights turned cool enough that Clara and Taza slept close beneath the same blanket, listening to coyotes sing beyond the fire. Weeks had passed since the battle. The Apache had scattered into smaller bands, traveling by night, hiding by day. Taza's wound had healed slowly, the scar stretching along his ribs like a pale serpent. He bore it without complaint. Yet Clara saw how he winced when he thought she wasn't looking, how his steps shortened when the pain caught him unaware. Still he smiled whenever she met his eyes, and that smile, worn but steady, was the anchor that kept her from drifting into sorrow. One morning, the mist still clinging to the canyons, she woke to find him gone. Panic seized her until she saw the faint trail of hoofprints leading up toward the ridge. She followed, her skirt brushing the sagebrush, and found him standing on the high ground, gazing east. The soldiers are gone, he said without turning. The settlers stay. They build fences where my people hunted. Soon the buffalo will be no more. Clara joined him, the wind tugging at her hair. Then we'll go farther. There must still be places they haven't taken. He shook his head slowly. There will come a day when there is nowhere left to go. She reached for his hand. Then we'll make a place of our own. He looked at her. This woman who had walked out of a world of lace and law, who had chosen a life of dust and danger, and for the first time he let the hardness in his eyes melt away. You would live like this? Always running? If running means I run beside you, she said, then yes. He kissed her forehead. Then I am the richest man alive. They spent that day riding along the high mesas, searching for a place where the land opened wide, a place untouched, where they could build something of their own. They found it near sunset, a narrow canyon fed by a spring, the water clear and cold, the soil rich with wild grass. It was no paradise, but it was theirs. Over the weeks that followed, they built a small shelter of stone and timber. Taza showed her how to weave willow branches for the roof, how to find roots that could be boiled into medicine. Clara planted wild seeds near the stream, their green shoots trembling in the wind like small promises. At night they sat by the fire, the stars vast and close. Sometimes Taza spoke of his childhood, the dances, the hunts, the stories his father told beneath the great sky. Other times Clara told him about the life she had left behind, the piano lessons, the dinners where women were told to smile and stay silent. You were never made for silence, Taza said once. She smiled. No, I was made for storms, he laughed softly. Then you came to the right land. For a while they were happy, truly happy. The world beyond their valley might as well have vanished. There were no soldiers, no fences, no names, only two souls bound not by law or tribe, but by the sheer stubborn miracle of love. But peace in the frontier was a fragile thing. One evening, as the sky burned orange and violet, Clara saw movement near the ridge, a distant flicker of metal. Taza's hand went to his rifle immediately. Riders, he said. They waited. The figures drew closer. 3 men in worn coats, rifles slung across their backs. Settlers by the look of them, hunters maybe, or claim seekers. When they reached the valley, the leader, a bearded man with pale eyes, halted his horse. Didn't expect to find folks out here, he called. You white lady? Clara's heart pounded. She could feel Taza stiffen beside her. We live here, she said carefully. The man smirked. Didn't ask that. I asked if you're white. You don't belong with him. Taza stepped forward, voice calm but sharp. We harm no one. Leave this place. The man's grin faded. That's funny talk for an Indian on white land. He spat. You know there's a bounty on your kind? Could be worth some good money. Before Taza could move, Clara stepped between them. No, you'll leave now. The man laughed, a sound dry as sand. Lady, I ain't taking orders from a squaw lover. He swung his rifle down, too fast, too reckless. Taza's gun barked once. The settler crumpled, dust rising around him. The other two froze, then turned their horses and galloped away, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. For a long time there was only silence. Clara's hands shook. You had no choice, she whispered. Taza looked down at the man's still body. Choice or no, death always brings more death. They buried him at the edge of the valley, marking the grave with stones. That night Clara sat awake by the fire, her thoughts heavy. They'll come back, she said. The others will tell, Taza nodded. Then we must leave again. She looked around at their small home, the shelter they had built, the spring that had become their life, and her heart broke. We can't keep running forever. He took her hand. We run until the world forgets our names. But the world never forgets, she said softly. It just changes the story. Taza stared into the flames. Then let them tell it true. The next dawn came cold and gray. They packed what little they had and saddled their horses. Before they rode, Clara knelt by the stream and let her fingers trail through the water. This was home, she said quietly. Taza placed a hand on her shoulder. Home is not place, he murmured. It is heartbeat beside your own. They rode north, the land stretching endless before them. Days turned to weeks. They crossed dry riverbeds, mountain passes, and wide plains where elk moved like shadows. And though hardship followed, so did something brighter. A peace that came from knowing they had defied a world built to keep them apart. One evening, As they made camp near a grove of cottonwoods, Taza grew quiet. His breathing was shallow, his hand pressed to his side where the old wound had reopened. Clara rushed to his side. No, stay with me. He smiled faintly. It seems my spirit outran my flesh. Don't you dare leave me. He reached up, fingers brushing her cheek. You remember what I told you in the cave? Her voice broke. You said we are the wind, he nodded. And the wind returns. Tears blurred her vision. You promise me forever. I keep my promise, he whispered. Even when I ride where you cannot follow. She held him then until his breath stilled, until the stars blurred in her eyes. When the morning came, she buried him beneath the cottonwoods, his bow and feathers laid at his side. The wind stirred through the leaves, soft and endless, like the sound of his voice carried through time. Years later, travelers passing through the Northern Territory spoke of a woman who lived alone in a small cabin by a spring. She wore Apache beads and spoke both tongues. Some said she had once been a lady from Texas. Others claimed she was a ghost who loved a warrior and never left his grave. But when the wind blew down from the high plains, the old ones swore you could still hear it. Her whisper carried on the air, "You're my first." And his reply, faint but eternal, "You are my forever."